Chapter 1: The City That Swallows Its Children. Lagos wore the evening like a fever, restless, shimmering, and unwilling to let its inhabitants rest. Traffic lights flickered weakly, swallowed by the chaos of danfos painted yellow and bruised with dents. Horns shouted over one another, vendors thrust roasted corn and sachets of pure water through dusty windows, and the air itself seemed stitched with impatience. Amara and Chike stood at a crowded junction in Surulere, her satchel pressed tightly under her arm, the weight of textbooks inside pressing harder than it should. Chalk still marked the creases of her fingers, faint white scars of a teacher's battlefield. She had finished her last lesson only an hour ago, but instead of going home, as her family expected, she lingered in the noise of the city, unwilling to return to the house where expectations sat heavier than furniture. Her phone buzzed. "Dinner at 8. Don't embarrass us." The message was from Dozy, her older sister. Another followed almost instantly. "Kola will be there." The words made her jaw clench. Kola Adeyemi, the rising politician with polished smiles and a voice that carried like a sermon. Her father had promised her to him months ago, framing it as duty, as honor, as the cementing of alliances. Amara had nodded silently then, but inside something had splintered. Marriage to Kola was not a future, it was a sentence written in someone else's ink. She boarded a danfo heading toward Yoba. The driver cursed the gods of traffic as though they were personal enemies. Amara slid into a corner seat, staring out at a city that seemed to sprint even when it stumbled. Neon signs flickered to life above crowded markets, children ran barefoot across open gutters with laughter sharp enough to cut the night. When the bus stopped near a small cafe wedged between a tailor's shop and a bookstore, she stepped out. The cafe was narrow, its ceiling fans spinning lazily, its tables occupied by students, poets, and the kind of people who believed conversation could ignite revolutions. She ordered a bottle of malt and sat near the window. For the first time all day, she allowed herself to breathe. Then the door opened, and a man stepped in, tall, lean, his shirt rolled at the sleeves, eyes scanning the room with the alertness of a hunter. He recognized her first. "You're Amara and Chike," he said. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Journalists usually ask questions. You make statements." He smiled, not embarrassed. "Sometimes the truth doesn't wait for permission." "I'm Chike Obi." The name struck her. She had read his articles, exposés on corrupt contractors, missing public funds, even whispers of cult societies operating behind political curtains. He had a reputation for writing things that made powerful men grind their teeth. "And you think you know me?" she asked, her voice dry. "I know your father is respected, and your school published an article praising your teaching. That's enough for a guess." He slid into the chair across from her without asking. Amara studied him. His hands bore faint ink stains, his wristwatch looked battered by time, but his eyes, quick, restless, were alive in a way she had not seen in the men her family pushed toward her. "What are you chasing this week?" she asked. "A story about money that disappeared through ghost NGOs. And maybe," he added after a pause, "a story about a drum." "A drum?" He reached into his pocket and placed a small carved bead on the table. Its surface was smooth, worn by handling, and carved with a face whose closed eyes seemed disturbingly aware. "I found this outside a senator's office. Men who claim they worship only dollars have begun leaving offerings again. Something old is waking." Amara brushed her fingertip over the bead, then quickly withdrew as if it had pulsed under her touch. "You shouldn't carry things you don't understand." "Neither should the people I write about," he replied. A silence grew between them, not empty but charged. Outside, the traffic wailed. Inside, the fan creaked overhead like an old witness. Amara felt the tension inside her shift. This man, this stranger with dangerous eyes, carried more truth in his weariness than Kola ever had in his speeches. Her phone lit up again. Another message from Gozi: "Don't be late. Don't provoke him." She turned the screen face down on the table. Chike leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to tell me anything. But if you notice something unusual, symbols, men asking questions they shouldn't, call me." He scribbled a number in the margin of a newspaper and pushed it toward her. Amara's hand hovered above the paper, then closed around it. "You're chasing shadows," she said. "Shadows," he replied, "are just truths waiting for light." The cafe door chimed again. A boy entered to sell evening papers. Chike bought one, barely glancing at the headlines, his focus still on her. And for the first time, Amara wondered what would happen if she stopped obeying the script her family had written for her. Chapter 2: The Silent Courtyard of Alife. The air in Alife held a weight Lagos could never imitate. It was slower, thicker, shaped by centuries of footsteps that had worn grooves into the red earth. Here, tradition wasn't nostalgia, it was spine. Chief Adebayo Folod stood in the courtyard of the shrine, his wrapper indigo, his coral beads heavy around his neck. He had been Kobiisi of his people for 12 years, and his face showed every season of decision, lines etched by the bitterness of droughts, by the sweetness of festivals, by nights of negotiation that tested his endurance more than war ever had. Before him, on a raised wooden platform, a drum slept beneath a red cloth. The Okàn Ayé, the heart of the world. Its skin was stretched from a cow that had been sacrificed before most of the village had been born. Its frame was said to have been carved from a tree struck by lightning. Some said it had been given to their ancestors by the Orisha themselves, others that it was stolen in war and bound by blood to remain. Priest Olimide knelt before it, his white robe brushing the earth. His head was shaved, his eyes narrow, and his fingers traced circles of chalk on the ground. He whispered verses under his breath, lines of Ifa, each syllable vibrating in the heavy air like invisible drums. 3 nights I cast the nuts, Olimide said without looking up, and 3 nights the same Odu came, then vanished before it could be read fully. Something crosses our path, Kobiisi. Something foreign but not new. Chief Adebayo frowned. Your words are always half riddles. Speak plain. Olimide's lips curved faintly. Ifa does not speak plain. Ifa speaks as thunder, you hear the crack, you wait for the echo, and only then do you understand how close it struck. On the far bench, under the shade of an ogba tree, old Durojiyo watched the ritual with a hunter's silence. His face was carved with scars of battles long ended, his eyes had the weight of a man who had buried too many comrades. He remembered the last time the drum had been struck, during the war, when young men marched out with cutlasses and ancient songs, believing their cause holy. The sound of the drum had filled their blood, but it had not protected them from bullets. The drum should not wake, Durojiyo said, his voice a dry rasp. When men rattle what is sleeping, they call beasts they cannot feed. Olimide glanced at him. You speak of war. I speak of prophecy. And prophecy has never stopped blood, the old man muttered. Adebayo walked closer to the drum. His shadow slid over the red cloth, and for a moment he thought, just for a moment, that the cloth moved as if stirred from beneath. He tightened his jaw. Tell me, Olimide, what do the verses say about the city? The priest drew a Kola nut from his pouch, split it neatly, and let the quarters fall onto a small mat. He studied them, lips moving silently, then nodded as though confirming something he already suspected. The drum's silence is tied to the city's noise. A woman will stand at the crossroads, between loyalty and rebellion, between silence and song. If her voice speaks, the drum will answer. If she remains silent, the drum will sleep and the city will eat itself. Adebayo felt a shiver crawl down his spine, though he refused to show it. And you believe this woman is real? Olimide finally raised his eyes. She already walks. I saw her shadow in my dream, She carried chalk dust on her hands and fire in her heart. Durojuiya spat into the dirt. Dreams are lies we tell ourselves so we don't die of boredom. But even he looked uneasy when a sudden gust of wind passed through the courtyard, lifting the red cloth just enough for a glimpse of dark, glistening skin stretched tight over wood. The sound it made, a faint sigh, almost like breath, froze all three men. Olimide touched the ground with his forehead. The drum is listening. Adebayo turned toward the gates of the shrine, beyond which lay the road that stretched toward Lagos. His chest felt heavy. The city was already swallowing their children. He had buried too many youths who returned with money but no souls. If prophecy was pushing Alife toward Lagos again, then the old ties between shrine and street were about to knot themselves into something dangerous. "Keep watch," he ordered, his voice stern but quieter than he intended. "And pray that the drum is only curious, not hungry." As night fell, frogs sang from the gutters, and the sky lowered itself like a curtain. In the distance, thunder rolled, soft, suggestive, a warning too early for rain. Chapter 3: Smiles Made of Knives. The banquet hall in Victoria Island glittered with chandeliers that dripped light like honey, though everyone in attendance knew the sweetness was borrowed. Politicians, businessmen, oil contractors, and the wives who wore galley-like crowns filled the tables, their laughter sharp as glass. Waiters glided with trays of champagne flutes, photographers snapped smiles that would later be printed in glossy magazines to prove prosperity still existed in Nigeria. At the center of it all stood Kola Adeyemi, his suit cut to perfection, his teeth a white promise that had cost more than some families earned in a year. He spoke with the rhythm of a preacher and the confidence of a man convinced that destiny had already signed his contract. "Progress," Kola declared, his voice rich, "is not an idea, it is a road we build, brick by brick, with our own hands. And this city, this great nation, deserves leaders who will not only dream of tomorrow but deliver it today." The applause arrived right on cue. He knew where to pause, where to raise his chin, how to let silence settle just enough before breaking it. The cameras caught the angle of his jawline, the tilt of his head, the sincerity his eyes learned to fake in university debates. Behind the clapping hands, behind the champagne bubbles, deals were already moving. An aide leaned close and whispered into his ear, 2 envelopes to the Perm SEC, 1 to the union leader. The journalist still sniffing around the NGOs, Chike Obi, his editor owes us a favor. Kola's smile didn't flicker. "Handle it," he said, lifting his glass in mock toast toward the crowd. At his side stood Ngozi Okoye, Amara's elder sister. She wore a dress of deep emerald, her posture immaculate, her gaze sharp. To outsiders, she looked like the perfect political hostess, loyal, admiring, dignified. But in her eyes simmered something else, hunger. Where Amara carried resistance, Ngozi carried envy, though she would never admit it even to herself. "Kola," she murmured when the applause dipped, "Amara will be present at dinner this Sunday. She will wear the blue." Kola tilted his head slightly. "You speak with confidence, Ngozi. Graciousness looks different when it isn't chosen." "She will do her duty," Ngozi insisted, though her jaw tightened. "Our families agreed. This marriage will secure what both sides want." "What I want," Kola corrected smoothly, "is to win. Marriage is simply the most beautiful costume for ambition." Ngozi forced a laugh, though it cut her throat on the way out. For all her devotion to tradition, for all her insistence that Amara submit, a small part of her whispered, "Why not me?" She smothered the thought instantly, the way a woman smothers a dangerous flame before it catches the house. Later that week, the Okoye dining table became a stage. The air was heavy with the scent of pepper soup, fried plantains, and unspoken commands. Amara's father spoke of business ventures, her mother watched her daughters like a hawk in fine lace. Kola arrived punctually, his presence filling the room with an authority that demanded admiration. He spoke of infrastructure projects, of youth empowerment programs, of scholarships that would appear just in time for the election season. Every word was polished, every gesture rehearsed. Amara listened quietly, her face smooth as clay, though inside every syllable struck like a hammer. "You must come with me to the university ceremony next month," Kola told her, as if scheduling the weather. "It will be your first public appearance as my fiancée." Amara set down her spoon carefully. "Has anyone asked me what I want?" The table froze. Ndosi's eyes widened, their darkness slicing like a blade. Her father cleared his throat loudly. Her mother's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Kola leaned back, lips curving. "What you want," he said softly, "will learn to want me." Ndosi smiled quickly, a brittle mask. "Amara speaks with nerves, that's all. She knows her responsibility." But Amara's gaze didn't leave Kola's. Something inside her, long muted, spoke through her eyes. It was not obedience. It was fire. That night, unable to endure the suffocating house, she walked out to the balcony. The humid air clung to her skin. In the distance, the stilt houses of Makoko shimmered under weak lamps, the lagoon reflecting scraps of moonlight. From somewhere below, the sound of a talking drum rose, quick, teasing, as though mocking the idea that life could be planned so neatly. She closed her eyes. For a moment she heard Chike's voice in her memory, "Shadows are just truths waiting for light." Her phone buzzed. "Ifioma, exhibition tomorrow. Come late. Bring your stubbornness." Amara smiled faintly. For the first time in weeks, her chest felt less like a cage and more like a door, one that could still be opened. Chapter 4, Crossroads in Color. Ifeoma's studio smelled of turpentine and old sugar, because it had once been a bakery before art conquered it. Canvases leaned against every wall, riots of oil and acrylic where drums twisted into eyes, where masked dancers emerged from strokes of black and red. A naked bulb swung from the ceiling like a pendulum, throwing shadows that seemed to dance along with the paintings. Amara stood in the doorway, caught between awe and envy. Ifeoma lived with the kind of reckless freedom Amara craved, no elders instructing her, no family deals chaining her future. She painted what she wanted, loved who she wanted, and defied whoever tried to tame her. "You're late," Ifeoma said, paint streaked on her cheek, silver rings glinting on her fingers. "But late is interesting. Early is obedient." Amara smiled, stepping inside. "You paint chaos and call it wisdom." "Chaos is wisdom," Ifeoma replied, leading her to the center of the room where the largest canvas waited. It was a triptych, 3 panels, each showing oil slicks that morphed into shapes depending on how you looked. From one angle, there were talking drums, from another, eyes watching, unblinking. "What does it mean?" Amara asked, unsettled. "That drums don't only speak. They listen. They eat. Sometimes they choose who carries their echo." Ifeoma's voice dropped, conspiratorial. "Careful tonight. There are eyes that don't come to admire art. Kola's people sniff around more than you think." Amara stiffened. "Why would they care about paint?" "Because paint is memory. And memory is dangerous." The exhibition began filling with guests, students with radical slogans in their pockets, bankers pretending not to know the activists they'd refused loans to, elders who remembered when art and protest had been inseparable. The chatter rose, clinking glasses mixing with debates about whether Ifeoma was genius or blasphemer. Amara wandered between canvases, losing herself in colors that seemed to shift whenever she blinked. Then she felt it, a presence beside her, a gravity pulling her sideways. She turned and found Chike Obi watching the same painting, his shirt less formal than last time, his eyes just as sharp. "You came," he said, as if surprised by his own relief. "I was invited," she replied. Her voice wanted to sound casual but betrayed a flutter. Do you always appear where trouble is being painted? I follow good tailoring, he said with a grin, then leaned closer. Your school, did anyone approach recently about a cultural ceremony? Something about donating computers in exchange for blessings? Her stomach tightened. Yes. A man came with a rehearsed smile. He brought Kola nut but mispronounced half the respectful words. I thought it was odd. Chike's jaw clenched. They're testing how far they can drag shrines into schools without making the law bark. And you think this ties to your drum, she murmured. He didn't deny it. Instead he asked carefully, if I needed to disappear for an hour, where would you take me? She should have laughed. Should have told him to vanish into his own shadows. But the room felt crowded with eyes. She took his hand as if the decision had already been made in her bones and led him out the back door into an alley where stray cats hissed at puddles. They walked quickly, turned corners, crossed a wooden bridge over a sluggish canal. When rain began, it wasn't gentle, it was the kind of rain that hammered roofs as though angry at them. They ducked into a waiting danfo, pressed together by strangers and the storm. The conductor slapped the side of the bus, rhythm sharp enough to be a drumbeat. Water streaked down the windows, stitching them into silver cloth. For a brief moment, their shoulders touched, their breaths fell into rhythm, and the world outside dissolved. They got off near Makoko, the floating slum that survived on stilts and stubbornness. Children darted across wooden planks with the balance of acrobats. Women rowed canoes piled with firewood, while smoke from cooking fires rose like weary prayers. Life here resisted erasure. Why here? Chike asked softly. Because secrets travel slower over water, Amara said. And because Kola's eyes don't reach this far. They sheltered under corrugated iron while the rain softened. She told him, quickly, about her father's promises, her sister's watchful envy, the suffocation of a wedding she hadn't chosen. He told her about missing funds, corrupt deals, and names whispered by men who believed spirits could guarantee power. So we are both commodities, he said with a bitter laugh. You to be displayed, me to be erased. Not if we rewrite the receipt, she replied, surprising herself. A click interrupted them, the sound of a camera shutter. They turned to see a boy in a canoe grinning, one tooth missing, a digital camera in his hand. Lovebirds, he teased before paddling away, laughter trailing him. The word hung in the air like a dare. For one heartbeat too long, Amara didn't move. Her pulse pounded louder than the rain. Then she stepped back, retreating into herself. I should go. I'll walk you, Chike said, though he kept his hands at his sides, the restraint burning hotter than any touch. On the road back, a billboard leaned above them, Kola Adeyemi, a new dawn. Someone had drawn horns on his head in black spray paint. The drips looked like laughter running down his face. And in Ilife, beneath the red cloth, the Okàn Ayé exhaled. Not breath, but something heavier. Priest Olimide woke from uneasy sleep, the taste of chalk still on his tongue. He did not know the names yet of the man and woman who had tugged the story forward, but he felt the crossing had begun. And crossings always demanded a toll. Chapter 5, Masks in the Dark. Kola Adeyemi was not a man who believed in coincidences. Every smile he wore, every handshake he offered, had been rehearsed in mirrors, measured in its returns. So when whispers reached him that Amara had been seen slipping out of an art studio at night, one frequented by students, radicals, and that irritating journalist, he did not rage. He calculated. From his study overlooking Victoria Island, he called for his driver. Take me to the lodge, he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharper knives. That lodge was no public place. Hidden beyond the city's sprawl, past roads that lost their names, it crouched inside a grove where silk cotton trees tangled the sky. At night, the clearing filled with masked men dressed in white, red, or black. Some called them a fraternity, others a cult. Kola called them necessity. Inside, lanterns smoked, and the floor was painted with chalk circles that intersected like maps of invisible countries. A goat bleated once before its throat was cut, its blood mixing with gin in a clay bowl. The leader, an elder whose face never showed without a carved wooden mask, welcomed Kola with a gesture. "You come restless," the elder said. "Restlessness is the root of ambition," Kola replied. "Someone interferes with my foundation. A teacher, a journalist. Both must be broken before they grow teeth." The elder touched the rim of the bowl, staining his fingers red. The drum stirs again. It has already chosen ears to hear it. You cannot break what is chosen, you can only cage it. Kola stiffened. "Then cage them." The elder's laugh was dry. "Even cages must be built with sacrifice." Kola dropped an envelope thick with dollars on the mat. "Build whatever you like. My election is the sacrifice I cannot afford to lose." Behind the mask, the elder's eyes glowed with an amusement that chilled the air. "Then pray the drum does not prefer hunger over silence." At the Okàn Ayé home, Ndozi sat at her vanity, combing her hair with sharp strokes. Her reflection stared back with eyes she didn't entirely recognize. Since childhood she had been the obedient one, the dutiful daughter, the example. Yet all her perfection had never earned her the promise Kola offered Amara. She thought of the way Kola's gaze lingered on her sometimes, not with desire, but with calculation. She was useful, not luminous. A reliable ally, not a bride. The bitterness rose like bile. "Amara is ungrateful," she whispered to her reflection. "She doesn't deserve him." Her mother's voice echoed from dinner past, "Ndozi, you are strong. But Amara. Amara shines. That is why men notice." Shine. A word like a wound. Ndozi dragged the comb harder, as if light could be torn out strand by strand. She began to imagine ways Amara could stumble, small at first, then greater. A misplaced photograph, a whispered rumor, a hint of impropriety. In politics, perception was sharper than knives. And Kola, though ambitious, was still a man. Men grew suspicious easily. Meanwhile, in a bar thick with cigarette smoke and arguments, Chike spread papers across a sticky wooden table. Beside him sat his friend, Bobatand, a fixer who knew more about backdoor politics than any official. "These NGOs are ghost shells," Chike said, tapping receipts with his pen. "They siphon money into private accounts, and the same names appear in contracts tied to Kola Adeyemi." Bobatand whistled low. "You're playing with fire. Men who dance with those masked lodges don't just defend themselves with lawyers. They defend themselves with disappearances." Chike's jaw set. "If I stop writing because I fear them, then I've already disappeared." Still, when he stepped out into the night, he checked his reflection in windows more than once. A motorcycle passed too slowly. A car idled longer than it should at the corner. The city itself seemed to lean closer, listening. And in Ilife, priest Olimide dreamed again. In his vision, a woman with chalk-stained hands stood between two fires. Behind her, a drum beat faintly, though no stick struck it. She opened her mouth, but instead of words, rivers poured out. The rivers twisted into roads, and on each road walked men in masks. He woke drenched in sweat. Outside, the village dogs howled without reason. "The crossroads are open," he whispered to the night. "And every path hungers." Chapter 6, The Cage Tightens. Amara returned from school one Thursday afternoon to find her mother seated in the living room with a look that was more command than welcome. The lace curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the restless street. On the coffee table lay a folded newspaper, its headline circled in ink. Teacher seen with radical journalist at art exhibition. The article was brief, written with more innuendo than facts, but the damage was clear. Names whispered. Photographs suggested. A shadow of impropriety cast deliberately across her reputation. Her mother's lips thinned. Do you understand what shame you invite into this family? With elections so near, with Kola watching. Kola is not my husband, Amara interrupted, surprising even herself with the sharpness of her tone. Her mother's eyes hardened. Not yet. But he will be. Unless you destroy everything with childish rebellion. Ngozi appeared in the doorway, her expression smooth as glass. Sister, the city talks too much already. You should be careful where you walk, and with whom. There was no accusation in her voice, no proof, but Amara felt the sting of betrayal anyway. As if Ngozi's shadow stretched behind the newspaper ink. I will not marry a man I do not choose, Amara said, her voice trembling with both defiance and fear. Her mother rose, her wrapper rustling like dry leaves. Then you are no daughter of mine. The words dropped heavier than any slap. Chike read the same article an hour later in a roadside kiosk. The vendor had added his own commentary, "Oh, this teacher girl is foolish. Mixing herself with journalists. Politics will swallow her." Chike's jaw clenched. He knew too well how whispers became daggers. He pulled out his phone, dialed her number, but it rang unanswered. He wanted to believe she was safe at home, but the hairs on his arm stood as though danger were already in the air. That evening, while walking back from a meeting, he noticed a black SUV trailing him at a careful distance. Too careful. He ducked into a side street, weaving through market stalls, but the vehicle did not vanish. A voice called his name. A man stepped from the shadows, tall, broad, his suit incongruously neat for the grime of the alley. He wore no mask, but his smile was worse than one. Mr. Obi, the man said smoothly. My employer suggests you leave certain drums to sleep. Otherwise, accidents happen in Lagos every day. Chike forced his tone calm. Tell your employers they should invest in better accountants. Their ghosts are too noisy. The man chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. You are brave. But bravery is a currency this city does not honor. He slipped back into the SUV, and the vehicle glided away like a patient predator. Chike stood still, sweat sliding down his spine despite the night air. He knew now, his words had already drawn blood. Back in Alife, Chief Adebayo received a visitor at dusk. It was a courier from Lagos, carrying an envelope sealed with wax. Inside, he found a photograph, Amara, stepping out of Ifeoma's studio beside Chike, rain blurring their faces but not their closeness. Beneath it, a single line scrawled in hurried ink. The crossroads are no longer prophecy. They have arrived. Adebayo's hand trembled slightly as he folded the paper again. He remembered Olumide's words about the woman of chalk and fire. Was it truly her? A schoolteacher bound to politics she did not want? Or was prophecy mocking them with coincidences? Durojiye, seated in the corner sharpening a knife, muttered, if Lagos poisons our roots again, we will regret letting its noise reach this far. Adebayo said nothing, but he kept staring at the blurred photograph, at the shape of a young woman who might soon carry more than she had ever agreed to. Meanwhile, in her bedroom, Amara lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like a slow, lazy trap. The newspaper article haunted her, but Chike's words haunted her more. Shadows are just truths waiting for light. If she stayed silent, she would become exactly what Kola and her family wanted, obedient, useful, erased. If she spoke, truly spoke, she would invite storms she could not predict. Outside, thunder cracked, though no rain followed. Somewhere far away, in the shrine of Alife, the Okàn Ayé gave a single low thrum, muffled by the red cloth. No one struck it. Yet it answered anyway, as if amused. Chapter 7, Fire Beneath the Veil. Ndozi sat in Kola's car, the leather seat smelling of money and cologne. The city crawled past the tinted windows, beggars tapping at glass, hawkers balancing crates of gala sausage rolls on their heads, lovers weaving through traffic on motorbikes. Yet inside the vehicle, silence pressed harder than the horns outside. "You summon me," Ndozi said finally, her tone careful. Kola adjusted his cufflinks, not looking at her. "Your sister grows reckless. Whispers cling to her name like smoke. Tell me, Ndozi, are these whispers true?" Her heart thudded. She thought of Amara's defiance at the dinner table, the fire that dared to answer Kola's threats with stubborn silence. Ndozi hated that fire as much as she envied it. "She has strayed," Ndozi said, each word chosen with precision. "A journalist shadows her. Chike Obi. He poisons her mind with talk of freedom." Kola's jaw tightened. "Freedom is a disease. And diseases must be burned before they spread." Ndozi hesitated, then leaned closer. "I can help you. My sister trusts me, even when she should not. Use me as your knife, and you will not need to dirty your hands." For the first time, Kola looked at her directly. His gaze lingered, weighing her not as an ally but as a tool. "Ambition wears many masks, Ndozi. You are loyal to me, or simply hungry yourself?" The question cut deep, because hunger was indeed coiled inside her. But she forced her voice steady. "I am loyal to what endures. You endure. Amara, she only shines. And even stars burn out." Kola smiled then, slow and dangerous. "Perhaps I underestimated you." Across town, in Ifeoma's studio, Amara and Chike sat among canvases that smelled of fresh paint and rebellion. Ifeoma had slipped out to fetch drinks, leaving them alone in the humming silence. "You shouldn't be here," Amara whispered, though she hadn't asked him to leave. "And yet I am," Chike replied. He leaned forward, voice low. "Do you believe in prophecy?" "No. I believe in duty. And in the weight of chains." "But what if duty is the prophecy? What if your refusal is the echo that wakes something older?" Amara shook her head, though his words sank into her bones. "I'm a teacher, Chike. I write lessons on chalkboards, not verses on destiny." He smiled, but it carried no amusement. "Even chalk leaves dust. And dust can choke kings." Their eyes locked, the silence thick with what neither dared speak aloud. For a heartbeat, Amara felt the world tilt, her hand almost brushed his. Almost. Then Ifeoma returned, music in her laughter, and the moment shattered. But Amara carried the ache of it home, hidden under her ribs like contraband. That night, Kola stood in the clearing of the lodge once more. Masked men circled him, their chants rising with the smoke of burning herbs. The elder's voice cut through the rhythm. "The drum stirs. Its hunger grows. To claim your crown, you must feed it." Kola stepped forward, unflinching. "What does it want?" The elder's mask tilted toward him. "Blood that is bound to you. A sacrifice not of strangers, but of kin. Only then will the drums sleep in your favor." Kola's thoughts sharpened instantly. Amara. The perfect union of bloodline and ambition. But to sacrifice her would end the marriage that cemented alliances. Unless. He glanced toward Ndozi in memory, her envy bright as fire. Perhaps there were other ways to twist kinship into offering. The chant grew louder. Somewhere beyond the grove, thunder cracked without rain. In Ilife, Olimide sat outside the shrine, gazing at the stars. Adebayo approached, troubled. "The photograph," the chief said quietly. "It was her, wasn't it? The woman of chalk and fire?" Olimide's eyes reflected the night sky. Yes. She is already walking the path. But paths fork, Kobiisi. One leads to ruin, one to rebirth. Which she chooses, even the Orisha hold their breath. The chief rubbed his beads nervously. And if the wrong choice is made? Olumide's voice was soft. Then the drum will not just echo. It will roar. And Lagos will drown in its sound. Chapter 8, The First Cut. Ndozi stood in Kola's private office, the city lights of Victoria Island glittering behind him like jewels stolen from the night. Papers were stacked neatly, campaign posters framed on the wall, but it was the man himself who filled the room with danger. You said you would be my knife, Kola murmured, circling her like a predator. Knives must prove their sharpness before they are trusted. Ndozi kept her chin high, though her pulse pounded. What must I do? Kola opened a drawer and placed a folder on the desk. Inside were photographs, grainy shots of Chike with Amara near Makoko, faces blurred by rain but unmistakable in closeness. Deliver these, he said softly, to your father. Whisper that the journalist intends to disgrace her, that Amara plots to embarrass your family name. Let the rot begin at the root. Ndozi hesitated, her stomach twisting. She wanted Amara humbled, yes. But this? To unleash shame in her own household. Kola leaned closer, his breath warm and poisonous. Do not mistake me, Ndozi. This is not a request. Loyalty is proven only in betrayal. She swallowed hard. And for the first time, she felt the weight of her own choice pressing down like a hand on her neck. Amara, meanwhile, found herself summoned once again to the family's parlor. Her father's expression was carved from stone, her mother's silence sharper than any scolding. The photographs lay on the table like open wounds. Her father's voice thundered, "You shame us with this journalist. Do you wish to destroy everything we have built?" Amara's throat tightened. I wish only to choose my own life. Choice is for those who stand alone, he snapped. You stand on the shoulders of this family. And you will not make us fall. Ndozi stood nearby, expression carefully arranged, concern, disappointment, nothing to betray her hand in the matter. Yet when Amara's gaze met hers, something unspoken passed between them. Betrayal has a scent, and Amara smelled it clearly. Chike's warning came not as words but as fists. He was leaving his editor's office when two men in black jackets blocked his path. Before he could react, a blow struck his ribs, another slammed into his jaw. The world spun, blood filled his mouth with the taste of iron. One man leaned close as Chike gasped on the pavement. The next article you write, we carve it on your skin. Stay silent. Then they were gone, leaving him in the gutter as the city's traffic rushed past, indifferent. He staggered upright, vision swimming. Pain roared in his chest, but beneath it burned something hotter, resolve. They thought fear would cage him. Instead, it had sharpened his pen into a blade. At the shrine in Ilife, Olumide woke suddenly in the night. The Okàn Ayé had thrummed again, louder this time, enough to rattle the bowls of chalk dust on the altar. The sound was no longer patient. He whispered into the dark, the first cut has been made. The drum tastes betrayal now. From the shadows, old Durujiya's voice replied, then blood will follow. It always does. Chapter 9, Secrets Carved in Smoke. The rains had ended, leaving Lagos washed but not clean. Puddles reflected broken billboards, and the street smelled of wet dust and roasted corn. Amara walked quickly along the narrow road toward Ifeoma's studio, her wrapper damp at the edges, her heart heavy from the storm inside her family. She had not spoken a word to her father since the photographs appeared on the parlor table. His silence had become a wall thicker than any sermon. Her mother avoided her eyes, and Ndozi's sweetness was suddenly sharper, every gesture coated with honey but hiding the sting of a bee. Amara knew. She could not prove it, but she knew. The betrayal carried Ndozi's handwriting, her precision, her cold ability to do what Amara never could, sacrifice blood for ambition. By the time she reached Ifeoma's studio, the weight of it all pressed like stones in her chest. She knocked once, twice. The door opened, and Chike stood there, his face bruised, lips swollen, one eye still shadowed by purple. "Who did this?" she demanded, stepping inside. He tried to smile, but it cracked. "Friends who believe silence is a better song than truth." Her hands hovered as if to touch his cheek, then withdrew. "You should rest, not chase ghosts." "They're not ghosts, Amara," he said, lowering himself into a chair. Papers lay scattered around him, some stained with blood where his knuckles had touched them. "They are men with money and masks. Men who believe they can buy destiny. And your fiancé, your family's chosen crown, feeds at their table." She looked at him, truly looked, and saw the exhaustion in his bones, the stubborn fire in his eyes. "You speak as though the whole nation is a wound you must stitch alone." "And you?" he asked quietly. "What do you carry?" "A wedding ring that feels like a shackle. A sister's shadow cutting your heels. Don't tell me you aren't bleeding too." Silence stretched between them, heavy and alive. Outside, the city roared, buses honking, hawkers shouting, children laughing in alleys, but inside, the world narrowed to their two breaths. Amara finally sank into the chair across from him. "I was raised to obey. To marry well. To strengthen the family line. But every time I sit in Kola's presence, I feel myself vanish. And when I sit here, bruises on your face and papers covered in dust, I feel." She stopped, ashamed of the heat in her voice. Chike leaned forward. "Say it." Her throat tightened. She wanted to. Gods, she wanted to. But the chains of her upbringing clanged loud in her skull. Instead, she whispered, "I feel like myself. And that is the most dangerous thing of all." They sat in silence, eyes locked, their unspoken words filling the room thicker than incense. Ndozi, meanwhile, sat in her bedroom, the ceiling fan slicing the air in steady circles. The house was quiet, her parents asleep, servants tucked away. She stared at her own reflection in the vanity mirror, candlelight throwing her features into sharp relief. She whispered to herself, "I am the elder daughter. I obeyed every rule. I studied, I carried the family's pride, I held my tongue when it mattered. And yet, it is she they want, she they crown, she they desire." Her fingers traced the edge of a framed photograph of her and Amara as children, arms linked, smiling in matching dresses. A memory of innocence that now tasted bitter. She blew out the candle, letting the room plunge into darkness. In the blackness, her envy grew teeth. Kola, at the same hour, met with two of his closest aides in a backroom bar on the mainland. The air reeked of beer and kerosene lamps, men played drafts in the corner, their laughter a rough soundtrack. One aide whispered, "Sir, the journalist does not back down. Even after the beating, he continues to write. And the teacher, Amara, she resists. The people admire stubbornness." Kola swirled his glass, watching the liquid catch dim light. "Admiration is cheap. Fear is expensive, but it buys loyalty that lasts. And if the people see you move too harshly..." Kola's smile was razor thin. "Then I will make the storm look like their fault." Already the newspapers bend. Already whispers spread. Soon even her family will beg me to save them from her disgrace. The man nodded, uneasy but obedient. As Kola left the bar, a sudden gust lifted dust into the night air, stinging his eyes. He blinked, annoyed, but for an instant he thought he heard it, low, distant, like the heartbeat of the earth. A drum. He shook his head, dismissing it. But the sound followed him all the way to his car. Far away, in Ilife, Olumide sat cross-legged before the Okàn Ayé, sweat gleaming on his brow though the night was cool. His chants wove into the shadows, ancient verses that tried to calm what could not be calmed. The drum answered with a single beat, so deep it rattled the roof. Durojuye burst into the shrine, blade in hand. "It calls louder," the old warrior growled. "What do we do when the heart of the world demands to be fed?" Olumide's voice broke. "We pray the chosen woman's courage holds longer than her fear. Because if she falters, the drum will feed itself." Chapter 10: The Shadow of the Drum. The festival of Owan was only a week away, and the city had begun to pulse with its approach. Markets brimmed with yellow cloth, beads of amber, carved wooden statuettes painted in gold. Drummers rehearsed on street corners, their rhythms mingling with the horns of danfos and the shouts of traders. For most, it was a time of celebration, of renewal. But for those tangled in the web of politics and prophecy, the festival loomed like a storm cloud. Amara moved through the markets with her students, showing them stalls of cowries and carved calabashes. She smiled when she had to, explain patiently when asked about the origins of songs or dances. Yet inside, she felt only the tightening of a rope around her throat. Everywhere she went, whispers followed. She caught her name slipping from mouths like oil. That is the teacher, she walks with the journalist, she defies her family. The shame her father had hurled at her had taken root in the community. She could feel it in every sideways glance. But worse than that was Nosy. Her sister was now all sweetness, all gestures of comfort, bringing Amara water, offering to braid her hair, sitting by her side in quiet hours. Too perfect. Too careful. Amara saw the dagger beneath the smile, though she could not yet grasp its hilt. Chike, meanwhile, limped through his days, bruises fading but never forgotten. His editor warned him to stay away from Amara, to focus instead on other scandals, corruption in oil companies, fraud in contracts. But Chike refused. "This is larger than contracts," he said, his voice hoarse from late nights. "It is about who owns our stories. Do we let men like Kola carve the narrative? Or do we risk our breath to sing another?" His editor sighed, lighting another cigarette. "You think words can fight knives? One day, Chike, you will learn that paper bleeds too." But Chike kept writing. His articles spread quietly, photocopied in universities, whispered in gatherings. Each word was a match thrown into dry grass. And though he knew the fire could consume him, he also knew silence was worse. One evening, Amara agreed to meet him again in Ifeoma's studio. She told herself it was for answers, for strategy, for understanding the danger. But when she saw him there, leaning against the window with his notebook open, she realized the truth. It was because she could not stay away. He looked up, tired but alive. "You came. I should not have. Yet here you are." The words hung between them, fragile as spider silk. She stepped closer, her heart hammering. "Chike, every step I take now feels like a betrayal. To my family, to tradition, to myself. And yet," he echoed softly, closing the notebook. He took a step toward her, then another, until they stood only a breath apart. His hand hovered in the air, uncertain, waiting for permission he did not dare ask. Amara's breath trembled. "This cannot be." "No," Chike agreed. "But sometimes impossibility is the only truth worth touching." Her hand rose, almost against her will, brushing his bruised cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into the warmth of her palm. For a moment, the world stilled, the market noise outside, the hum of the ceiling fan, even the ache of fear. All that remained was the pool between them, ancient as the drum itself. Then she withdrew, as though burned. "We cannot," she whispered. "Then we will not speak of it," he said, though his voice cracked. But it will live in silence, in every word we do not say. At that very hour, Ndozi sat across from Kola in a secluded lounge. The air smelled of tobacco and imported whiskey. Kola watched her carefully, his gaze sharp, amused. "You hesitated," he said, sipping his drink. Ndozi's jaw tightened. "I delivered the photographs. My father turned against her, just as you asked. And yet your eyes flickered, as if part of you still belonged to her." Ndozi clenched her fists beneath the table. "I am not my sister. I do not burn with rebellion. I endure. That is why I will stand at your side when she falls." Kola studied her for a long moment. "Endurance is useful. But loyalty, true loyalty, demands more." He leaned closer, his voice a whisper meant to cut. "At the festival, the drum will sound. I will need an offering, something to silence doubt. Perhaps a piece of your sister's defiance. Perhaps her trust." Ndozi's stomach twisted, but she forced a smile. "Then you will have it." Inside, though, a storm raged. She had crossed the line now. There would be no turning back. Far away in Ilife, Chief Adebayo prepared for the pilgrimage. The shrine had grown restless, the Okàn Ayé thrumming louder, vibrating the ground itself. Olimide painted white chalk across his arms, his chants rising like smoke. Duroji sharpened his blade, muttering, "The city is drowning in whispers. When the drum calls, it will not choose sides. It will swallow all." Olimide's voice broke through, "Unless the woman of chalk and fire stands. Unless she resists her chains." Adebayo's heart was heavy. He had seen the photograph, he had heard the whispers. He feared that the woman destiny had chosen might already be too entangled in mortal plots to rise. Night fell over Lagos. In her room, Amara could not sleep. She sat by the window, listening to the distant rhythm of drums practicing for the festival. Each beat echoed in her chest, an unwelcome reminder of prophecy, of Chike, of her own forbidden desire. Ndozi passed by the doorway, pausing. "Sister," she said softly, "you should rest. The days ahead will be heavy." Amara looked at her, searching for the child she once knew, the girl who had shared laughter, secrets, dreams. But all she saw now was a mask too carefully worn. "I will rest when the storm ends," Amara answered. Ndozi smiled faintly. "Then you may never rest at all." As she walked away, Amara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Somewhere far beyond, in Ilife, the Okàn Ayé beat once more, louder, deeper, demanding. The cage had tightened. And soon, it would break. Chapter 11, The Festival of Masks. The city awoke before dawn on the morning of the Owan festival. Streets pulsed with preparation, women in bright yellow wrappers sold garlands of sunflowers, men balanced calabashes of honey and palm wine on their heads, drummers tightened the skins of their instruments until the air quivered with anticipation. For most, it was a day of joy, a chance to honor the river goddess, to dance, to feast, to pray for fertility and prosperity. But for Amara, it felt like a march toward execution. Her mother fussed over her attire, adjusting beads on her neck, smoothing the golden folds of her wrapper. "Smile, Amara. This day may mend what has been broken." Her father said nothing, but his eyes, sharp and unyielding, betrayed his judgment. The scandal of the photograph still weighed like stone, and only marriage to Kola could wash it away. Ndozi entered, her own attire equally radiant, her smile flawless. Yet when her gaze lingered on Amara, the sweetness tasted of poison. "Shall we?" she said softly, offering her hand. Amara ignored it, walking past. The festival ground was a river of color and sound. Thousands gathered near the sacred grove where Oan's priests led chants. Drums thundered, masqueraders danced in elaborate costumes, their masks painted with suns and serpents. Children tossed flowers into the river, while elders whispered blessings. And at the center of it all stood Kola. He wore white agbada embroidered with gold thread, his presence towering, his smile radiant. Around him clustered dignitaries, journalists, and chiefs, each bowing, each hungry for his rising star. When Amara arrived, the crowd stirred. Whispers rose again, sharp as thorns. That is her, the teacher who walks with the journalist. Will she still defy him today? Kola stepped forward, taking her hand with calculated tenderness. Beloved, he said loudly, his voice carrying, today we honor Owan. Today we wash away doubt. She wanted to pull away, but her parents' eyes anchored her, heavy with expectation. Chike stood at the edge of the crowd, bruises healed but spirit burning. His notebook was hidden beneath his agbada, his pen ready. He had no illusions, his presence here was dangerous, perhaps fatal. But he could not stay away. Not when the drums of prophecy and politics beat in unison. Not when Amara stood at the heart of it all. Ifeoma squeezed his arm, whispering, "You must be careful. Kola's eyes search for you." "I know," Chike murmured. "But truth must be written, even if in blood." The rituals began. Priests poured honey into the river, women danced with gourds of water balanced on their heads, the crowd clapped in rhythm. Then came the moment when silence was called, the drummer striking a pause that hung heavy in the air. Kola stepped forward, his voice solemn. Owan blesses unions that strengthen the land. Today, before gods and men, I claim Amara as my chosen, my promise, my sacrifice to the future. The word hung in the air, sacrifice. Most heard it as metaphor. But Ngozi knew otherwise. She remembered his whisper in the lounge, an offering. Something to silence doubt. Her heart pounded. She looked at her sister, radiant yet stiff as a statue, and for the first time, doubt gnawed her ambition. Did she truly want Amara destroyed? Or had she only wanted her diminished, her light dimmed so her own could shine? But Kola had no doubts. His hand tightened on Amara's wrist, his smile never faltering. At that instant, the air changed. From nowhere, from everywhere, a drum sounded. Not the festival drums of men, but deeper, older. The Okàn Ayé. The ground trembled. Birds scattered from the trees. The crowd froze, murmuring in confusion. Olumide, who had traveled from Ilife with Chief Adebayo, dropped to his knees, chanting in Yoruba. It wakes. The heart of the world wakes. Amara felt it inside her chest, the vibration threading through her bones, rattling her teeth. She tore her hand free from Kola, gasping. "What is this?" Chike shouted from the edge of the crowd, "It is the truth they cannot bury. It is the drum that refuses silence." The people turned, recognizing him, whispers flaring into shouts. Kola's eyes narrowed, rage flashing like a blade. He signaled discreetly, and men in black jackets began to move through the crowd toward Chike. Ngozi watched it unfold, her heart tearing in two. She had fed Kola with betrayal, she had sharpened herself into his knife, but now she saw what he intended. Not a marriage, not unity, but a blood sacrifice disguised as love. Her hands trembled. For the first time, she stepped between Amara and Kola. "Enough," she hissed. "She is not yours to destroy." Kola's smile never wavered, but his grip on Amara's arm tightened again. "Step aside, Ngozi. Do not mistake envy for courage." Ngozi's voice shook, but she stood firm. "If the drum demands blood, then take mine." The words stunned even Amara. For all her betrayal, all her ambition, Ngozi's defiance in that moment was real. But Kola's eyes darkened. "Perhaps I will." The ground shook again, harder this time. The Okàn Ayé beat so loud the river itself rippled. The festival dissolved into chaos, people screaming, running, priests chanting louder to calm what could not be calmed. Amara tore herself free, reaching for Chike across the distance. For a fleeting instant, their hands brushed, their eyes met, and everything else fell away. The impossible romance burned bright, undeniable, doomed. Then the black-jacketed men reached Chike. A blade flashed. The crowd roared. The drum thundered. And the world tipped toward blood. Chapter 12, Blood on the Riverbank. The crowd broke like waves under the weight of the unseen drum. Screams, chants, and prayers rose all at once, clashing with the sound that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. Dust spiraled upward as though the ground were breathing. Kola's guards lunged toward Chike. The journalist barely had time to raise his arm before a blade sliced across his shoulder. Pain tore through him, the world narrowed to fire. He staggered, clutching the wound, but his other hand still clutched the notebook. Pages fluttered, stained with his blood. Chike! Amara screamed, pushing through the mass of panicked bodies. People grabbed at her, trying to drag her to safety, but she tore free, driven by something larger than fear. Kola's voice boomed above the chaos, his face still composed, his agbada untouched by dust. Do not be deceived. This is the wrath of gods upon liars and traitors. Stand with me, and I will shield you from the storm. His words cut the crowd, splitting them. Some clung to him, desperate for order, others fled, suspecting his shadow in the calamity. Ndozi remained rooted, trembling between her sister and the man she had allied with. She saw Kola's mask of control cracking, rage seeping through. She saw Chike bleeding yet unbowed. And she felt the drum inside her bones, as if it were choosing sides, as if it demanded she finally declare her own. Amara, she cried, rushing forward. Take him. Take Chike and run. Amara stared, stunned by her sister's sudden defiance. Ndozi. Go. Ndozi screamed, tears streaming now. I have done enough wrong. Let me at least do this. Chike stumbled, his vision blurring. Amara reached him just as another guard swung a machete. She seized a fallen drumstick from the ground, ornamental, meant for festival rhythms, and struck the guard across the temple with desperate force. He fell, stunned. She pulled Chike against her, feeling his blood soak into her wrapper. Stay with me, she whispered fiercely. Do not leave me now. His breath came ragged. Amara, you shouldn't. I am nothing but words. And words are what they fear most, she answered. The earth shook again, harder. People fell to their knees. In the distance, Olumide and Chief Adebayo pushed through the crowd, the priest shouting prayers that few could hear above the thunder of the Okàn Ayé. The prophecy. Olumide cried, pointing at Amara. She stands at the crossroads. The chalk, the fire, it is her. Kola's face twisted with fury. Lies of old men. She is nothing but a woman blinded by lust. But even as he spoke, the river swelled, waters frothing though no rain had fallen. A shape shimmered on its surface, fluid, luminous, like a woman woven from gold and current. The people gasped, Oan herself, or the echo of her. The goddess's voice was not sound but vibration, carried on the drumbeat. It filled every chest, every skull. Blood has been spilled. The debt must be paid. All eyes turned to Kola, to Amara, to Ndozi. The triangle of betrayal and choice. Kola, desperate, seized Ndozi by the arm, dragging her forward. Here. Take her. Kinship, blood of blood, she offers herself. Ndozi struggled, terror and regret exploding across her face. No. I never. But Amara moved before thought. She stepped between them, shoving Ndozi behind her. If blood is demanded, then it will be mine. I will not let her carry my sins. The crowd gasped, the ground still trembling. Chike, bleeding, tried to rise, reaching toward her. "No, Amara." But she silenced him with a glance, steady, unflinching. For the first time, she felt no chains, no weight of duty or shame. Only clarity. She spread her arms wide toward the river. "If I am the woman of chalk and fire, then let my blood write the truth." The drumbeat rose to a deafening thunder. Kola lunged, desperate to seize control, but in that instant, the river surged, a wall of water crashing between him and Amara. The force knocked him back, tearing his agbada, his composure drowning in mud. Ngozi screamed. The crowd scattered further, some prostrating, some fleeing. Amara stood at the water's edge, her reflection shimmering with the golden figure of Owan. For a heartbeat, goddess and mortal aligned, two women, one destiny. Then the water leapt upward like hands and pulled Amara into the river. Chike's scream tore from his chest as he lunged forward, but the guards restrained him. His wound bled freely, staining the soil. He thrashed, desperate, but Amara was gone beneath the surface, swallowed by divinity or death. The drum's thunder ceased. Silence fell heavy and terrible. And in that silence, Kola crawled to his knees, drenched and broken. His eyes burned with fury and fear, yet he forced a smile, twisted and hollow. "You see," he rasped to the people. "She was claimed because she defied tradition. I remain. I endure." But his words rang false. Even those who still clung to him felt doubt like cracks in stone. Ngozi collapsed to the ground, sobbing into her hands. Chief Adebayo whispered a prayer. Olimide only stared at the river, his face pale with awe and grief. Chike fell silent at last, his body weak, but his mind already writing. He knew Amara's story was not an ending, but a beginning. For rivers remember. And drums never forget. Chapter 13, Epilogue, Echoes in the River. The city returned to its rhythm, but nothing felt the same. The market women still shouted over pyramids of tomatoes, Danfo still belched smoke along crowded streets, the smell of roasted maize still drifted at night. Yet beneath the noise, Lagos carried a silence that no one could name. The silence of a river that had swallowed a woman. Kola stood before cameras 3 days after the festival, his agbada crisp again, his voice steady. He spoke of unity, of sacrifice, of tradition upheld. The river demanded, he declared, hands raised as though blessing the crowd. And we obeyed. Those who defy are carried away. Those who remain are chosen. His allies clapped. His words filled newspapers, broadcast stations, political posters. But the people's eyes were different now. They nodded, but their silence grew heavier with each speech. Children whispered of the teacher who defied him. Elders muttered of a prophecy that had not ended, but only begun. And Kola himself, though he smiled, though he raised his glass at banquets, sometimes woke at night drenched in sweat, hearing drums that no one else heard. He told himself they were echoes, nothing more. But in the darkness, his heart beat too quickly, as though it feared being drowned. Ngozi did not leave her room for weeks. The mirror showed her a face she could not bear, the betrayer, the survivor, the sister who offered knives in exchange for favor. At night she dreamed of Amara's last look, steady, unafraid, filled with something Ngozi could never claim. Not envy, not rivalry, love, even at the edge of death. Her parents tried to console her, telling her she would yet marry well, that her family name could still shine. But every kind word only deepened the hollow inside. Sometimes, late at night, she crept to the riverbank alone. She knelt, whispering apologies into the water. The river never answered. Yet once, when the wind shifted, she thought she heard a drumbeat ripple across the surface, low, mournful, forgiving nothing. Chike carried a scar across his shoulder that never healed fully. But it was not the wound that weighed him. It was the notebook he carried everywhere now, its pages stained with blood and water. He wrote Amara's story in furious, tender lines, the teacher who defied power, the woman who stood at the crossroads, the sacrifice that shook the city. His articles spread quietly at first, then openly, students copying them, workers reading them aloud in bars. Her name became a song, a protest, a warning. They called her Amara Ayé, Amara, the heart of the river. Yet no word he wrote dulled the ache in his chest. He returned often to Ifeoma's studio, sitting by the empty chair she once occupied. Sometimes he swore he could still feel her presence, a warmth in the air, a chalk line on the floor, a whisper just beyond hearing, "Do not let them forget me." And he never did. Chief Adebayo returned to Ilefe with Olumide and Duroji. They performed rites for the Okàn Ayé, covering it again with red cloth, bearing bowls of herbs around it, chanting until their throats bled. But the drum was not silent. It no longer demanded with violence, but it hummed, constant, patient. A reminder. Olumide told the chief, the prophecy did not end with her death. It has only shifted. The woman of chalk and fire was claimed, yes, but her echo lingers. One day it will rise again. The chief nodded, weary. And when it does? Olumide's eyes were distant. Then we will see whether Lagos drowns, or finally learns to listen. The people carried on. Some believed Kola's version, that Amara was punished for arrogance. Others whispered she had been chosen by Owan herself, lifted into the river to guard the land. Children painted her face in chalk on alley walls, surrounded by flames drawn in charcoal. Women sang her name in market songs. And always, faintly, beneath the noise of traffic and trade, the drum's echo lingered. Some swore they heard it only at night, others during storms, others when truth was spoken too boldly. But everyone heard it eventually, if only in their bones. On the 40th day after the festival, Chike returned to the riverbank alone. He knelt, placing his blood-stained notebook at the edge of the water. "Amara," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They think you are gone. But you live here, in every word, every silence, every drumbeat. You were impossible, yes, but is impossibility that teaches us how to dream." The wind shifted. The river stirred. And just for a moment, he swore he saw her reflection shimmer in the current, chalk upon water, fire beneath the surface. He smiled through his tears. Then the vision was gone. But the drumbeat remained.